everyone, thanks for hopping on. I'm Eliza. I'm a senior marketing manager here at Regal, and today I'm joined by Adam.
Hey guys, I'm Adam Kiesman. I'm a forward deployed engineer here at Regal.
And we're going to have a conversation today about what successful CX voice AI agent deployment looks like. Regal is a voice AI agent platform. We build, improve, and manage voice AI agents. And one of the things that makes Regal really unique is our Copilot. It's how teams can manage AI, build agents, test, and continuously improve their agents. Most AI deployments stall because of what happens after the contract is signed. All of the integrations, the deployment, that's where things really get difficult before the calls go live. So today we're going to cover Regal's CX AI agents, what they do in practice, what an FDE does, and why that matters, and then the 4-step process we use for deployment. So getting into things, I'd love to talk a little bit about just what stands out about Regal when you're on with customers every day.
Yeah. So I think it really boils down to sort of 4 major themes. The first being that we know customers and their contacts want to leverage voice first as their communication method. So we really try to meet customers where they are. We have this frontier voice AI technology that allows them to do that. The second piece is this idea of complexity, right? I see it every day where contact centers, particularly in the CX space, have these really complex tech stacks. It's a CCaaS platform, it's a CRM, there's a Snowflake or a S3 instance, whatever your database is, and Regal really gets to act as this sort of unifying layer. So, some of our feature sets like our unified customer profile really sort of show off that fact where you can basically have a one-stop shop for your contact information across the entire contact life cycle right there in the Regal app. The third theme is this idea of resourcing. So I see on LinkedIn all the time that people ask this question like, I want to get into AI, but I don't know where to start. And that's actually not really what I hear in the space. What I hear is, I want to get into AI, but who's going to do that, right? These teams are stretched very thin. Everyone has a full-time job already. Everyone may not be up on the latest tools and best practices. And again, that's kind of where Regal's professional services arm, or particularly my team in the forward deployed motion, really gets to shine. And then this fourth theme is that Regal, at least, was born in the contact center space. Our co-founders, Alex and Rebecca, basically built Regal because it's what they wished they had when they were running a very large call center over at Angie's. And so, when customers are faced with choosing vendors, they basically have this option of, let's just go with another voice AI provider, or let's go with a voice AI provider that has actual context and experience in this space.
Yeah. And what outcomes are the teams that you're working with seeing using Regal?
Yeah, we have a laundry list of sort of the metrics we get to boast about. So it's 200 plus successful deployments, a tick over 400 million successful calls made. We've driven $8 billion with a B dollars in revenue for our customers, boasting a 97% containment rate with our customers, 4x our speed to lead across the board, and maintaining a 90% CSAT score across the board as well.
Yeah, important to put the B there, billion. How long does it typically take our customers to deploy their first AI agent?
Yeah, so it really does depend on the use case, but this is where some of our latest feature sets become really exciting. So we just pushed out within the past couple weeks Regal's Copilot, and what Copilot really allows you to do is it gets to act as whatever your favorite coding agent, whether you use Cursor or whether you're using Claude in your day-to-day life, it becomes that but native to Regal. So its interface is essentially that of a chat interface, but you can interact with Copilot to build agents and iterate on agents and listen to transcripts and change your call cadences. And the reason I bring that up now is, 6 months ago, it took me and my team, a lot of very devoted effort over, a number of weeks to really properly deploy these AI agents within contact center ecosystems. And now it's, an exercise of days.
Yeah, I think that speed is just really cool to see in real time. So We're going to get into the nitty gritty of what each like part of the process looks like for deploying agents. But before that, I want to talk about the forward deployed engineer role. It's super hot right now. What does a forward deployed engineer at Regal mean?
Yeah, it's a great question. Tech has this way of like surfacing the new sexy position based on new spaces emerging and new needs emerging. You think about, the general manager early in the Uber days, or the go-to-market engineer, like our friends at Clay are sort of pioneering now. The FDE role fits into that bucket, but what becomes really, I think, interesting is that the job description changes based on not just like the sector or the space you operate in, but the company that's sort of organizing the position. So I can really only answer about what an FDE is at Regal. The sort of cute tagline I like to put out there is that the FDE is who takes you from we bought AI agents into this AI agent lives seamlessly in our contact center space. So maybe more specifically, that can be your fully accountable technical expert that's there from day 0 or day -1 in the requirement scoping phase, all the way through to your go live and beyond, both touching the tech, which we'll talk more about, but also the business case, the ROI cases, etc.
And how is that different from a typical implementation role?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I guess from a customer perspective, what I would say is every AI agent build is really its own product launch, right? So obviously Regal is a platform and a product, but each AI agent you build is its own standalone product as well. So if we sort of agree to the premise that every AI agent is its own product build, then every deployment is really its own little startup, or at least a microcosm for its own startup. So I'll sort of illustrate what that means, right? On day 0 or day 1, we build out a mission and a vision to the deployment. You then move into building out like a proper use case, right? You need a value proposition. There's some sort of return on investment, right? Every single AI agent, in some ways boils down to doing one of and two things, which is some sort of cost savings exercise or some sort of introduction of incremental revenue increase, right? So building out those cases, and then comes the builder aspect, which is requirement gathering, prototypes, holistic prototypes, an MVP, a V0, a version 1, building out the integrations, the underlying telephony involved in this, iterating, testing, and obviously all the data and reporting that goes along with that too. But I guess to most directly answer the actual question, the team and I talk a lot about, in the late aughts, early 2010s, call it, traditional SaaS implementations were really like an exercise in project management, right? You'd buy some seats from Salesforce, you'd hire a SFDC certified operator to basically implement this CRM system to your specs, and once you were kind of ready and in a cruising state, you'd be off to the races with Salesforce. Now, in AI agent deployments, an exercise in product management, it's a PDLC, and that's not to say that project management work is terribly important, but it's just a different skill set, right? So for those that are as nerded out on like Marty Kagan and Silicon Valley Product Group as I am, understand, right? There's a very fine line in the skill set needed for one or the other, and because of that, I don't think it really comes as a surprise that our call it 90-95% of our forward deployed team are ex-builders, they're ex-product, they're ex-engineers, because sort of product sense, so to speak, is kind of a requirement for this job. Maybe the quicker way to classify what an FDE is at Regal is it's like a product manager meets management consultant.
That's a good way to put it. And what does the day-to-day look like for you?
Yeah. So great question. Let's build on the product manager meets management consultant thought here. If I had to break my day down, it would be into 3 parts. So we'll call it like 40%, 40%, and 20%, because I think that adds up to 100.
It does.
So the first 40% is this, we'll call it the management consultant side of things, right? So it's the building business cases for customers, it's building the ROI cases, it's understanding where there's more cost savings or more incremental revenue to be gained. Some of your more classic stakeholder management pieces, working with our accounts and finance team on, the financials, both, contractually, but also more specifically in terms of what the customer can see as far as, revenue lift or cost decrease. The second 40% of my day is the product manager piece. It's the builder piece, really more the product builder piece. So that's building AI agents, building the integrations necessary for that. So connecting with your CRM or EHR or database or CCaaS platform. There's obviously the whole sort of data analyst side of things too. So building out custom reporting mechanisms for our customers so that they at a moment's glance can check in to see how a given AI agent is performing. And then it goes kind of more into the engineering role too, in that a lot of times customers will need true custom feature sets built out for them. So making writing the necessary scripts or code to actually deploy new features into production on behalf of our customers. And then I think we're at 80%. So the last 20% is like this idea of continuous improvement, which is obviously important in every professional role. It's particularly important in every professional role in tech, but I think it's even more especially important for an FDE. And the reason there is, look, our customers come to FDEs because they're not quite yet maybe at the bleeding edge, or they don't have the resourcing to be at the bleeding edge of AI. And I take like a great deal of responsibility to our customers that if they're going to join us on kind of this journey and trust us with that it's terribly important for our team to be aware of the latest, to know the latest, because that's essentially informing the recommendations and decisions that we make. And it just becomes increasingly important when we're operating in a space that changes week to week, day to day. I think that gets us to 100%.
It does, yeah. So we talked a little bit about Regal. We talked about your role. Now I want to transition and really talk about how we deploy these agents. So at Regal, we use a 4-step process. Step 1 is going to be prepping and defining success. What does that look like?
Yeah, so it's zooming out. It's a 4-step process. It's a flywheel, not quite a checklist, because it's sort of never ending, right? But the idea here is that there's a prep stage, a building and a testing phase, an iterating phase, and a launch phase. So the idea of this prep phase, similar to what I was saying earlier, it's building executive alignment, right? Building out an ROI case, proving what the cost savings and or revenue increases. The second piece probably is more like that, feature or functionality requirement gathering effort. So mapping a contact's life cycle end to end, right? Thinking through all of the different gotchas. The story starts when a contact picks up the phone, but one of n things can happen from there, and building out that entire kind of design flow. And then the last one in planning is really setting your baseline metrics and your target metrics, understanding the performance of your human call center, understanding the AI's place within the contact center, and really understanding what our finish line is, what our North Star metrics are, and then going from there.
How do you know or understand when you have all the information needed to move from prep to the next phase of deployment?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's kind of like when is alignment established, right? So, look, there are tons of alignment frameworks out there, and I'm sure everyone has their preferences or doesn't. To kind of cut through the noise, the way I know early days that I'm aligned with a customer is, it's that the executive sponsor knows what the ROI case is. It's that the operational stakeholder knows what the AI agent is going to do, and it's when the operators know how the AI agent is going to do it.
So once you have those 3 things and you're ready to move on and build and test, what's your role in that?
Yeah, so this is really where Regal's Copilot has sort of been paradigm shifting, certainly for me, certainly for our team, and I believe for our customers too, because, you know, we did it quite well, but there was sort of this, I think, you know, you call it like a blank slate problem, where day one, you know, call it 6 months ago, day one was looking at a blank prompt and, you know, building from there. Copilot gives us like an enormous head start. So what the process looks like more tactically is, you know, during our requirement gathering, I'll collect, you know, transcripts and recordings from the human agents or human reps, and in order to kind of jump off the diving board, so to speak, all I have to do at that point is upload these to Copilot, and I get kind of like a ready to rock version 0. Now it's certainly not, you know, prod ready from there. We need to, you know, do heavy testing, you know, and there's certainly still a human in the loop there, but the head start it gives us is like tremendous.
Yeah. And that's only been just a few weeks. What does it look like if you think about other companies that maybe don't have FDEs or they don't have Copilot? How long would this process be taking?
Yeah, it's a fun question. So I think the way I would think through that is you can kind of build like the 4-quadrant matrix, right? Where your horizontal axis is like speed and your vertical axis is quality. So in quadrant 1, in your, you know, top right, you have someone like Regal, right? You have proper forward deployed motion and you have Copilot. So we're fast and of high quality. Then in quadrant 2, you have, you know, the forward deployed engineer without this sort of accelerator. So it's high quality, but it's still slower, certainly slower than the alternative. In your quadrant 1, you would of course have, or in your quadrant 3, I suppose, you'd have like someone with neither, which is slow and of bad quality. And then in your bottom right quadrant, you would have someone that has, you know, an accelerator like Copilot, but has no professional services arm, which would basically give you a very fast, poor product.
It's the perfect combination, FDEs and Copilot. So once
Up and to the right.
Yeah, once you move past building and testing, you're on to our third step in the deployment process, which is iteration. What does this look like?
Yeah, this is why I sort of specified it's not a checklist, it's a flywheel. You know, to try and not say too much corporate jargon. But it is like particularly important here. There's like a fun line in the movie The Social Network where the Zuckerberg character talks about fashion is never finished, and the Andrew Garfield character is like, what are you talking about? But in a way, it's how I feel about iteration, right? Like, the effort here is to move fast and continuously get better. So we're able to do that with Copilot. We're able to move fast, and then the getting better is an exercise in, you know, going, I think, beyond more traditional like QA processes in a couple ways. One, you could automate the building of test cases and simulate these phone calls with Regal. So again, you know, some time ago, the testing process was me picking up the phone 100, 1,000, maybe more times, right? Obviously not a scalable solution, so Regal solved for that. Regal built out a proper test case generator and then a test case simulator. So we can basically mimic, you know, tens, thousands plus calls so that we kind of see all of the different directions that a call can take and ultimately build out solutions for handling those. You know, I think I'm describing in many ways solving for edge cases. You know, the idea here is that Copilot partnered with the FDE doesn't have to just solve for happy path. We can solve for all paths.
So once you've stress tested and like really iterated on the agent, then you're ready for launch. That's probably exciting. What does it look like?
Yeah, I mean, launch days are exciting. What it looks like in practice is you know, Adam clears his schedule. But no, I think more seriously, of these phases, the launch phase, I think, is where Regal's like learnings manifest themselves the most, right? And what I mean by that is we literally have a 73-point go live checklist, right? We very much took a no stone left unturned approach to this. A number of those 73 items are automated now with Copilot, but it's it's an exercise in making sure you've covered all of the bases, right? We talk a lot internally about having high confidence launches, which is basically the opposite of low confidence launches. A low confidence launch would be a lot of open questions, a lot of I don't knows. A high confidence launch means that you've checked all these boxes, that you've set Copilot up to, regularly monitor live calls so that if, something comes up to the surface on launch day, you can quickly change and iterate it. I think equally importantly, you can identify it, right? Call it 6 months ago, launch days were basically me listening to every single call that came in, because it's kind of like this high intensity day. Whereas now I can actually allow the agent to listen to the calls, and I can kind of oversee it and dictate the changes we need to make on the fly.
Mm-hmm. So in your time at Regal, you've worked on a ton of enterprise deployments as an FDE. What do the teams that have succeeded do differently in their deployment and across the board?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think the first one, perhaps the most important one, is what we'll call like a true champion, a true internal, meaning on the customer side, a champion. I think at some point we stopped using this phrase, but we used to call it like the product evangelist, right? So really like the Regal evangelist within our customers. This has not been particularly difficult to get, actually, which I think is a promising sign towards the product itself. But that person basically needs to be, a believer, a user in part, a builder, certainly a thought partner, but also someone with like kind of the authority or the context to make internal decisions on the fly and work at the speed in which I think both parties want to work in. The next thing that I've kind of noticed that more successful customers have is what I'll call like documentation readiness, right? It doesn't mean that you have the cleanest house ever within your tech stack, but it means that you're sort of ready to speak towards or provide some of the low-hanging fruit documentation that we need on day 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So this is things like, your human agent call processes, your current, if it's an outbound use case, what your call cadences are, if it's an inbound use case, how your IVR is built out, some of the sort of benchmarking data that we would need, what your agent's average handle time is, what the escalation rate most normally is, if it's an outbound use case, what the answer rate is, certain things like that. And then maybe the last one will go a bit more abstract, and it's one of those hard to quantify, but it's a mindset, right? There's a necessity of belief and want to here, right? Look, we've proved out the value of this technology. It becomes an exercise in agreeing on the willingness to kind of put the time to plant the seeds to reap the benefits.
What Adam described is really different from how most AI vendors operate. It's what happens when you have an FDE sitting at the intersection of your product, engineering, your business, and helping you stay accountable towards your goals. And like you said, we're always working to like drive revenue or save money for these companies, and that's really what your goal is, and you're taking a lot of accountability in that partnership. So those are all the questions that I had for Adam, but we're gonna transition to questions in the chat. So if you have any questions, you can throw them in the Zoom chat, and we'll get through as many as we can. If we don't get to them, we'll be sure to follow up over email with the answers. Looks like we have a few here. I think you sort of hit on this in the last answer, but how do we know if our data is ready enough to start? Like, how do we know if we have the right data?
Yeah. So what I would say to the person that asked that question is just you asking the question kind of means you're ready, because I wouldn't think about this. It goes back to the anecdote that I kind of said about like how do we get into AI versus who will get into the AI, right? If you ask me without even seeing your data, I think I would say your data is ready. In part, that's why the FD exists, right? It's to make sure that you are pulling the right data, or you have the, more specifically, what we should call it documentation, because it's not purely, just like lists and lists of CSVs. It's, your documentation too. And, with the help of the FDE, you'll kind of wrangle all of that together. Perhaps because the the truest answer is I don't think we need any of your data to get started.
Another one, this is a good one. Speaking of lists, can we see the 73-point checklist you mentioned?
Yeah, if you sign on with Regal tomorrow, then in 3 weeks I'll show you the list.
Perfect. Does Regal work for outbound calls or just inbound?
Yeah, the short answer is both.
How does Regal handle calls that the AI agent can't resolve? So how does escalation work?
Yeah, this is a great question. So I think the easiest way to think about it, or like the entry to thinking about it, is don't like create some mental model that's too abstract, right? So what we're doing, like what this exercise really is it adding in an efficiency layer, right? So the reason I sort of frame it that way is because your contact center has an escalation path now. Your contact center will likely have a escalation path when it's hybrid AI and human. And I won't go like too far into like the futurology of it, but I'm of the mind that if and when call centers are 100% AI, there will still be an escalation path. That just might be in between AI agents. The reason I say all of this is that there will be cases where AI agents can handle certain calls, again, by design, not because of like some shortcoming, but think of highly regulated areas where AI is literally not allowed to handle those use cases yet. We then kind of build in escalation paths on purpose. So, building on this like highly regulated space, well, if we'll call like it selling an insurance policy as an example, right? So AI agents can't sell insurance policies today. But that doesn't mean that there's no cost savings exercise to be gained there. The cost savings exercise there is screening leads, right? So you can kind of cut these long screening processes that your closers are handling, handle those with AI agents, and allow your closers to actually close and sell.
Yeah, I think that really like represents how our knowledge of the contact center is so important, because we're able to really understand like, okay, what do escalations look like today, and how does that change with AI agents? Well, I know we're about at time, so thanks so much for joining us, Adam. Really appreciate it. And to everyone watching, keep an eye on your inbox for our AI deployment guide. We'll be sending that out later today. And if you want to keep the conversation going or hear more about how we deploy agents at Regal, you can find us at regal.ai. Thanks.
Thanks, Liza. This was a lot of fun.